Hurricane Helene, a powerful Category 4 storm, made landfall near Cape Coral, Florida, on September 24, 2024. Residents had boarded up windows and evacuated coastal areas, heeding warnings from the National Hurricane Center. The storm surge predictions were dire, with forecasts of up to 12 feet in some areas. As Helene approached, the skies darkened, and the winds picked up dramatically. Rain began to fall in sheets, driven sideways by the increasing gusts. Streets emptied as people sought shelter. The power flickered intermittently, a sign of things to come. The storm's eye was visible on radar, a menacing circle of calm amidst the surrounding chaos. Boats were tossed ashore, and homes near the beach were flooded. The sounds of the wind howling and the waves crashing against buildings were deafening. Emergency services were on standby, ready to respond once the storm passed. The eye of the hurricane passed over Cape Coral, bringing a brief but eerie calm. Helene's maximum sustained winds reached a staggering 150 miles per hour at landfall. These powerful winds wreaked havoc across the Florida coastline. Trees were uprooted, power lines snapped, and homes were damaged. The storm surge, reaching up to 10 feet in some areas, caused significant flooding in coastal communities. Homes were inundated with seawater and businesses were destroyed. The force of the water carried debris inland, adding to the damage. Many areas were left impassable due to the high water levels. Heavy rainfall continued, leading to widespread flooding. Rivers and streams overflowed their banks, inundating surrounding areas. The extent of the damage became clearer as daylight broke. The recovery process would be long and arduous. As Helene moved further inland, it weakened from a Category 4 hurricane to a tropical storm. The wind speeds decreased, but the threat of heavy rainfall and flooding remained significant. The storm's path took it through central Florida and into Georgia. Although Helene was no longer a hurricane, the heavy rainfall continued to pose a serious threat. Rivers and streams continued to rise, prompting flood warnings across the region. The saturated ground increased the risk of landslides and mudslides. The storm's slow movement exacerbated the flooding situation. Evacuations were ordered in several areas as the floodwaters continued to rise. Emergency shelters were opened to provide refuge for those displaced by the storm. The focus shifted from wind damage to the dangers of inland flooding. As Helene moved into Georgia and North Carolina, it brought torrential rainfall and widespread flooding. The already saturated ground couldn't absorb the additional rainfall, leading to rapid rises in river levels. Numerous roads were closed due to flooding, making travel difficult. The heavy rainfall also caused widespread power outages. Downed power lines and damaged substations left millions without electricity. The lack of power hampered communication and rescue efforts. In North Carolina, the mountains experienced particularly heavy rainfall, leading to flash flooding and landslides. Several communities were isolated due to road closures. Emergency crews worked tirelessly to rescue stranded residents and restore power. The full extent of the damage would not be known until the floodwaters receded. Tragically, Hurricane Helene claimed the lives of at least 12 people across Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina. The causes of death included drowning, electrocution, and falling trees. The loss of life highlighted the devastating power of the storm. Millions of people were affected by power outages across the affected states. The lack of electricity disrupted daily life and hampered recovery efforts. Utility companies worked around the clock to restore power, but the widespread damage made this a slow and challenging process. The governors of Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina declared states of emergency. This allowed them to access federal resources and deploy the National Guard to assist with rescue and recovery efforts. FEMA responded quickly to the disaster, deploying teams to the affected areas to provide assistance. They set up distribution centers to provide food, water, and other essential supplies to those in need. As Helene moved out into the Atlantic, it left behind a trail of destruction. The full extent of the damage is still being assessed, but it is clear that the recovery process will be long and challenging. The immediate focus is on rescuing stranded residents, restoring power, and providing essential supplies to those in need. As the floodwaters recede, the focus will shift to debris removal and rebuilding damaged infrastructure. The long-term recovery will require a coordinated effort from government agencies, non-profit organizations, and the private sector. Rebuilding homes, businesses, and infrastructure will take time and significant resources. The experience of Hurricane Helene underscores the importance of preparedness and the need for resilient infrastructure. The storm served as a reminder of the destructive power of nature and the importance of heeding warnings and taking appropriate precautions.